Okay, schos of our learning should be a panacea. I'm going to start Mem Beis, Amid Beis. 3 lines from the top. Itmar. That's the only thing that we have to know from before is that we had a Machlekes Rav and Shmuel regarding if the slaughtering of the paraduma has to be done by a kohen or not. Rav, his opinion was it needs to be a kohen. And Shmuel said, no, it doesn't need to be a kohen. And the opposite was with the par of Yom Kippur, where Rav said it didn't need to be kohen. It did not need to be a kohen. Shmuel says it does. Okay, but the Yom Kippur part is not going to be relevant. So it says Itmar was stated by Amiroim. Itmar is a compound. Yes, Amar. It has been stated, and it's when it does that, it quotes a Machlekes Amiroim. Yeah, that's usually what Itmar is. Shchitas para bezar. A non-kohen that shechs the paraduma. So we have here a machlekes. Rabami amar kshera, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha amar psula. Rabami says that's fine, doesn't need to be a kohen, and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says that it's pasul. Ula amar kshera, Rabami la psula. When it comes to Ula says that it's kosher. However, some say that he said that it's pasul. Okay, let me stop right here and just go through the psukim, just so you have what's going on. So listen to this, because there's this is Parshas Chukas. It says, speak to the Jewish people and take a paraduma, no mum, hasn't put a yoke on it, and v'nasata myself Elazar HaKohen. Give it to Elazar HaKohen. And take it out outside the camp. Take it out. And slaughter it in his presence. Okay, Rashi over here says, when it says Elazar, mitzvah b'sgan, not the Kohen Gadol. The mitzvah is for the Sagan Kohen Gadol to do this. Then b'shachat Rashi tells us Zar Sheichet v'Elazar Raya. Azar is going to do the shechita. Who held that Azar can do the shechita? That's following Rabami. It's following Ula, according to one version. It's following Shmuel. Okay. Let's go a little further, just so we get the some other details here. Now, Elazar the Kohen is going to take from the blood, and he's going to sprinkle it opposite the Bayal Mayed 7 times. The saraf has a parlane of the part is going to be burnt in front of him, the skin, the flesh, and the blood, al pirsha, with its dung, is all burnt. Then it says the Kohen takes a piece of cedar wood, hyssop, shnei telas, we said the crimson thread, and he throws it into the burning para. The Kohen washes his clothes, and he washes his body in water, and afterwards he can come to the camp, and the Kohen is tummy until the evening. Rashi says he's tummy until the evening, and then he can come into the camp. The one that burns it has to wash his clothes. He's also tummy. Okay, then it says that a pure person will gather the ashes, v'asaf ish tahar, and he'll place it outside the camp in a pure place, and it will be a mishmeres, keepsake. Okay. Then it says that the one that gathered the ashes has to wash his clothes. We're going to keep it as a remembrance. Okay, now that's just a part of it. Then it says that they take for the person that's not pure, for the impure person, from the dirt, from the dirt, which means from the ashes of the burning chatas, and they should put on it mayim chayim. And then they have to take a hyssop, dip it into the water. The tabla b'mayim mishtar, a pure person dips it in the water and he sprinkles it on anything that was tummy. Okay. You ready? Goes like this. Basically, what we're going to do in today's daf is we're going to go through the psukim. And a lot of times it says, Elazar HaKayan, it says Ishtahar, it says HaKayan. And what does it mean? And what does it refer to? Which part of the process has to be a Kayan and not? So we start off discussing the Shchita, and that's the Machlekes Rab and Shmuel, basically, also Rabami and Rabbi Tziknacha. But there's a lot more to this, because that Machlekes trickles over into other parts of the process. Masav Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba l'siyu al Rav. Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba asks a question in support of Rav, which means he's asking a question on Shmuel. Rav said that the paraduma needs to be shechted by a kayan. At the end of this, we're going to say, what was his question? So this question is going to take us down half the page at least, and then we're going to try to analyze what question was he asking. Ainli ella hazas meimea she'ein kshem b'isha k'b'ish. When it comes to sprinkling the water, it can't be a woman. Ve'ein kshem ella b'yayim. And it's not, and it can't be done by night. It has to be done by day. This is a brisa that's going to quote psukim to prove this. But where do we know that it can't be a woman? That the Gemara is going to need to tell us. But how do you know that it needs to be by day and not by night? Because it says, please chata by bayim hashlisim, please chata by pasuk 12, which means on the third day he must purify himself. Okay, on the day it says bayim hashli. Okay, it tells us it's by day. We also know that the sprinkling can't be done by a woman. Minayin l'rabbis shchitasa v'kabalas dama v'azaz dama. How do we know that the other parts of the process, which we'll translate, also need to be done by day and not by a woman? So what are we talking about over here? We're talking about the slaughtering of the paraduma, receiving the blood, the sprinkling of the sprinkling of the blood opposite the tent of meeting. You're on a different mountain. You're sprinkling it across towards the tent, the Beis Hamikdash. The burning of the paraduma, the throwing the wood, the cedar wood, and the hyssop and the crimson wool into the fire. How do we know that all of that needs to be done by day and not by a woman? Both of those halachas, two halachas, by day, and that it needs to be a man. Now, the truth is, we don't really need a pasuk to tell me that it can't be a woman for these things, because in most of them it said Elazar or it says Hakayan. So, for example, well, the Shachat Solofanov doesn't tell me, but let's take something. Elazar Kain takes the blood and he has to sprinkle it. So it's obviously not a woman that's going to be allowed to do it. The question is, does it have to be done by day? Could it be done by night? That's what the Gemara is asking. And the other things, could it be the Kayan is going to, so I know it's not a woman that's doing it. but does it need to be done by day? So Talmud Laimar Torah. So it says in the pasuk, Zais Chukas HaTorah, that this is the law, which tells me that there's one halacha, Torah Achas, there's one law that goes through the whole thing. Now, this is not so simple. But anyway, that's what we learned. Yachal Shani Mar Ba'afasifas Afra Umila Mayim B'Kiddush. Now, what about at the end? At the end of the process, it says that V'asaf Ishtar Es Efer Apara V'Nyechem. I'm sorry. Yeah, V'asaf Ishtar. That it needs to be gathered. How do we know that the gathering of it and the filling up the water and then putting, is the water put on the ashes or the ashes put on the water? How did it work over there? Says, I don't remember what it is. If the ashes is on the water on the ashes. But the mixing of the water with ashes. One way or the other. How do you know that all of that needs to be done? Or maybe I would think that needs to be done also by day. So it says, Talmud Laimar Zais. It says Zais Chukas HaTorah, that this is the laws, and don't add to it. You follow? The word Torah tells me I have to include everything else into these halachas. Zais tells me no, don't include other things into these halachas. It's only what it says. So the Gemara right away says, well, you just made a distinction here. Certain things you said that it needs to be done by day because it says Torah. And other things you say it doesn't need to be done by day because it says Zais. So look, I have two options. What made you choose this one over that one for these different services? So we could learn everything from the sprinkling of the water. When it comes to the sprinkling of the water, a woman can't do it. Why? The pasuk says, "The lakach is it's pasuk 18. If you have a comment. A ritually pure person must take some hyssop and dip it into the water, which some of the ashes of the red cow been mixed, and sprinkle it on the tent, on the vessels, on the people that were in it, and on anyone who touched it." Okay. Now, when it says the lakach ezay the taval b'mayim ish tahar, it says that it needs to be a man. Who can take the ezay and dip it in? Only a ish tahar. This is the beginning of the sprinkling, right? He's going to dip the ezay, the hyssop in, and he's going to use it to sprinkle. That needs to be a star. So I know that it needs to be a man. And we also know that it can only be done by day because it says bayayim hashlishi. By bayayim hashlishi. That's was that a pasuk before? That was earlier. 19. Yeah, but it was actually a pasuk earlier in pasuk 12. By bayayim hashlishi. So if that's the case, that it needs to be a man by the sprinkling, and it needs to be by day. So often you have shchitasa, the kabbalas tama, bazas tama, shreifasa, vashlachas eitzer bezer, shnit klas, ayal ben ksher beisha kibish, ben ksher nala bayayim. So I'll also include all of those as well. What are all of those? The shchita, the slaughtering, the blood, catching the blood, sprinkling the blood, the burning of it, the throwing the cedar wood into it. So since those also need to be a man, how do I know? Because it says Elazar Hakayan or just Hakayan. So I know that it needs to be a man. So if that's the case, that it has the same halacha, one halacha, that it needs to be a man, so I'll apply the other halacha that it needs to be by day as well. However, the gathering of the ashes, the filling of the water, and the mixing the water with the ashes, that will be excluded, since that could be done by a woman. It doesn't say that who has to do that, who has to gather it. And we're going to discuss that a little bit later, if that's clear. Because it actually says, well, one pasuk is a little bit vague. It says they will take for the impure person from the burnt tatas, and they'll put water, benasan olav. Oh yeah, they'll put water on it. That's pasuk 17. Okay, so whatever the case is, the filling of the water and the mixing of the water, that could be done by a woman. So therefore, it's going to be permissible by day and by night. Okay, that was the brisa that we quoted. Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba says, this is a support for Rav, and it's going to be a question on Shmuel. Rav said that the shechita needs to be done by a kayan. So it's Hai Mai Tiyufta. What do you mean that you have a question here? What's the question here? So it says, well, look at it like this. What was this whole discussion? That you can't have a woman doing the shechita. Right? That's what we were very clear. A woman can't do the shechita. Shechita needs to be by day, and it can't be a woman. So if that's the case, then it also needs to be a kayan. Maybe that's what you think. If it can't be a woman, then it has to be a kayan. It's two options here. Either if you allow a woman, then okay, no, it doesn't have to be a kayan. But if it can't be a woman, then automatically it has to be a kayan. Forget about the rest of the world. So if that's the case, then we would have a question on Shmuel. See, it has to be a kayan. The problem is that the premise is not a perfect premise, because we have the sprinkling of the water, which a woman, we said, was not allowed to do. Right? We didn't discuss the sprinkling of the water. We discussed filling up the water, mixing the water with the ashes. We didn't discuss the sprinkling. But now we're saying the sprinkling of the water, a woman is not allowed to do, but a non-kayan is allowed to do. It doesn't have to be a kayan that sprinkles the paraduma water on the impure person. So you see, just because a woman can't do it, that doesn't tell me that it needs to be a kayan. So what was the original question? What's the question on Shmuel? That it needs some sort of proof that it needs to be a kayan. So Amar Abaya, this is the problem. Isha my time. What's the reason why a woman can't do the shechita? Because the pasuk says v'shachatei salafanav. You have to shecht it in front of Elazar. Now, what did that mean? Did that mean that Elazar was supposed to shecht it? Sounds like it. If you're telling me that it can't be a woman, why can't it be a woman? Because you're translating v'shachatei salafanav, that it should be slaughtered in front of Elazar, means that Elazar has to shecht it. Elazar v'leisha. So it needs to be Elazar. Well, if it needs to be Elazar, then Zar Nami. Elazar v'leizar. So it also can't be a Zar, because it has to be Elazar, who is the Sagam Kayan. And it can't be a Zar. A Zar is a non-Kayan. And it can't be a non-Kayan. So that's the question on Shmuel. See, who told you that the shechita can't be done by a woman? It was the way you translated the pasuk. V'shachatei salafanav. Now, I had two ways yesterday of translating that pasuk. One way was the way Shmuel learned it, that someone else is allowed to shecht it. It just needs to be in front of Elazar. And the way Rav learned it is that Elazar needs to shecht it. So why does it say lefanav? just let it be a lazar. So it says, well, Rav says that you can't have hesach hadas. That he has to concentrate on the shtika. Anyway, okay, whatever the case is. That's the question. Amar Ula. Amar Ula. Kala parsha kula mashma moitzi miyad mashma or mashma memela. When you read through this portion, so it's highly complex. Every pasuk could be saying something different than the pasuk before, and sometimes the pasuk is also saying the continuation from the pasuk before. Now the words over here, mashma, it implies moitzi miyad mashma, that it's excluding from what was immediately said prior. That's what it's implying. And it's also mashma memela. It's also implying that it's a continuation of what it was saying before. So let's go through the psukim. This is right at the beginning. It says, take a para aduma. We're in pasuk gimel now. Give it to Elazar HaKohen. So give it. Oh, that's it. The it is coming up soon. 1 second. First, it says Elazar HaKohen. It says Elazar v'loy l'deris l'Elazar. Or I saw Elazar v'loy l'deris l'Elazar. Yeah, the it is here as well. This first one goes to Elazar, but the later generations doesn't have to go to Elazar. Well, who can it go to? Who can it go to? So, Ikadamu l'deris b'kayin gadol. Some say what that means is that the first one went to Elazar, who's the Sagan Kayan. He's the second, the vice Kayan. The vice Kayan Gadol. And, but later generations has to go to the Kayan Gadol himself. Ikad Amri, others say, L'deris b'kayin hedyet. That later generations it goes to the Kayan hedyet, to any kind. Okay, so it's unclear. I know that there's a distinction, but I don't know what the distinction is. It makes sense to say that later generations, any kind can do it. But where do you get this idea that later generations has to go to a kain gadol? That's a very strict law. And where did you get that implication? So the Gemara says, Gamar chuka chuka miyem kippurim. Remember, we had Zeis chuka satira, we have the word chuka sailam by Yom Kippur. So we learned chuka chuka, it's exer shavah, that the laws of Yom Kippur would apply to this, the paraduma, just like over there needs to be the kain gadol. So too over here needs to be the kain gadol. So there's the opinion that holds that the paraduma needs to be performed, that process needs to be performed by the kain gadol, that would learn it from Yom Kippur. Let's go further in the psukim. V'haitzi oisa, and that says that you must take it outside the camp. We're still in pasuk gimel, talking about the paraduma. Shlo yoitzi acherasima. You take it outside the camp, but you take only it. You can't take another animal with it. Okay, the Tanan also was taught in the Mishnah. Let's say the animal doesn't want to go out. It's having a tantrum. How old is the animal? Is it 2? So what do? So, well, you say you take the other animal out with it, and then you get it to go out. That's how you get the. So, you can't take out this whole event over here. You can't take out a black cow. There's supposed to be a red cow, right? You can't take out a black one because people will say, "Oh, this time they used the black one." So that's not going to be good. See, you can't take out a black one. And you can't take out a red one either if they have 2 red cows then. So you shouldn't say that they shechted 2 of them. What's the problem if they shecht 2? There's a problem of kavana. Yeah. Any work that you do together with this one is going to passel it. So you can only shecht 1. Maybe it's hesach hadas. Okay. Rebbe Yomer, Leiman Hashem Lazar. Rebbe says that's not the reason. Elam Mishum Shinemar, it says Isa Levada, V'haitzi Isa. It says you take it out. It doesn't say Isam, them. It says Isa. It's a clear pasuk. What are you telling me that it's because they might say this, they might say that? The pasuk says that you can only take one out, and so therefore it's having a tantrum. Yeah, you're gonna have to pick it up and carry it up. The Tanakama Aksiv Isa. Why did the Tanakama say that? Because people might say they shechted a black one. The Gemara says, Man Tanakama, Reb Shimoni. It's a very interesting Gemara. Who's the Tanakama? The Tanakama, it says, this is the opinion of Reb Shimon. The Darish time of the Kra, that Reb Shimon, he interprets the Torah based on the reasoning for the Torah. In other words, Reb Shimon, a lot of times in halacha, we have reasons for certain halachas. And we say, oh, if the reason doesn't apply, so then the law shouldn't apply. We say, no. We think we have the reason, but the law is the law. It doesn't. According to Reb Shimon, it's not like that. According to Reb Shimon, the reason for the law is the full reason. So, for example, the example that's given is that you're not supposed to take a mashkin to give a loan. You're not supposed to take a collateral after the fact, only originally. But afterwards, you're not supposed to take a collateral. It says from a widow. You can't take a collateral. So Shimon says she's going to need it back by night. It's not going to look good. The widow's going to end up coming to your house to get the collateral, whatever it is, the blanket or whatever. So she's going to come to your house to get it. So that's only if it's a poor woman, says Reb Shimon. But if it's a wealthy woman that she doesn't need it back every day, so for her you can take it. So in other words, he's looking at the pasuk, looking at the logic, and telling you that the law is going to change if the logic doesn't apply. Based on that, so we would say over here as well that what's the reason why the Torah tells me v'haitzi Isa that you have to take it out? Because there's a problem of taking out a black one, people may say. So don't tell me why you're telling me what people are going to say. No, the whole reason why the Torah says it is because of we don't want people to say that you can use a black one, or they use the black one. The reason why you can only take out one is because of it. My binayu. What's the difference? It could be binayu, the apik. Chamar Bahadei. We're on top of page 43. There's a donkey, you take out the donkey. So according to the Tanakama, no one's going to ever claim that we're allowed to use a donkey. Some may say, well, they used the black one. They didn't have a red one, they used the black one. But the donkey, no one's ever going to claim. So according to Rebbe, it says, I saw you can only take it. So it's forbidden to take out a donkey together with the paraduma because it's having a tantrum. So, but according to the Tanakama, the whole reason why you weren't allowed to do it is because of what people might say. Over here, there's no problem. Okay, we're going further in the psukim. The shachat Isa, you slaughter it. Which pasuk are we in? Probably pasuk Dalet now. No, and the pasuk Gimel. You slaughter it in front of him. So slaughter it. You can only slaughter one at a time, like we said before. Could be a problem shechting two. As we explained, that would be an issue of kavana possible. Lefanav is the big question. In front of him, what does in front of him mean? Rav says shleisiach daitem imena. See, Rav said b'shachreis lefanav who shechtze, the Elazar shechtze. So why does he say lefanav? That lefanav means that he has to pay attention. And Shmuel says shehezar sheichet v'Elazar raya. Shmuel says no. It's telling you that Elazar doesn't do the shechita. someone else shechts it, a non-Kayan shechts it, and Elazar just watches. Okay, let's go further. Now we're in Pasuk Daled. It's like a commentary for these. Okay. V'lakach Elazar Kayan midama. It says Elazar will take from the blood. V'lakach Elazar Kayan midama be'etzbai. He takes the blood with his finger. Now all of a sudden Elazar is taking the blood. It wasn't clear who shechted it. That's Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. So l'Shmuel la durei le'Elazar. Shmuel saying, yeah, it's putting the service back into the hands of Elazar because it was a non-Kayan a minute ago that was doing the shechita. Elazar has to take the blood. L'Rav, according to Rav, there's a problem. Who shechted the animal? Elazar. Now you have to tell me again, V'lakach Elazar akayan midama. He's the only one that's here, right? He's the one that's doing the whole thing. Why does he have to repeat it? Very surprising. It says Elazar Akayan. It's actually telling you that it doesn't need to be Elazar Akayan. Because otherwise, why would it be it's like a double negative? I don't know. There's a problem with the double negative. But it's telling me that the shechita was done by Elazar. So the catching of the blood, it doesn't have to say Elazar. The fact that it's telling it to me is telling me that any Kayan is allowed to do it. Seems like exactly the opposite of what it's saying. It's using the rule of Ein miyat achar miyat el l'rabbis. When you have a double negative, it's going to include. It's not a negative. It's actually, that's confusing. It's not a negative. It's an exclusion. And a double exclusion is coming to include someone else. It's coming to include a Kayan Hedin. Okay, now it goes further. What pasuk are we in now? We skipped number pasuk Hey. We're up to pasuk Vav. The Kayan takes cedar wood, Yisaf, and he throws it into the Eper apart. The Shmuel, according to Shmuel, Dafilu b'Kayan Hedyet. You see, what happened was, according to Shmuel, the shechita was done by a zar. The receiving of the blood and the sprinkling of the blood was done by the skan, by Elazar. Now it's telling me, V'lakach HaKayan, that it doesn't need to be the skan, it could be any kayan. Yeah? Rav, according to Rav, he just said that it could have been any kayan a minute ago. Why? Because he said in Ribay Achar Ribay, in Miyat Achar Miyat El Rabbis, he said it was coming to include any kayan. So why does it have to say V'lakach HaKayan now? It says it's true. Salkadait, it's necessary. Salkadait Chamina Kivan Lav Gufa the Paran and of Leli by Kayan. I could have thought that over here you don't need a kayan at all, because this is not the actual cow. It's not the paraduma. This here is the other ingredients that get added in, the condiments, the cedar wood and the hyssop. So I could have. I'm sorry. Sauerkraut relish. Right. This is a sauerkraut relish. So I could have thought that you don't need a kayan, so it has to tell me that it's a kayan. V'lakach hakayan. V'chibes begadav hakayan. Kayan shall wash his clothes. V'kihunai. That tells me that he has to be wearing his clothing when he's doing this. He can't be wearing his weekday clothes. I know it's not in the Beis Hamikdash, but you have to wear your kayan clothing. V'tami hakayan ad ha'erev. The kayan will be impure till evening. Kayan b'kihunai l'dairis. For all future generations, also he needs to be wearing his clothing. Remember before we said that in future generations it doesn't need to be the skan. We had two opinions. It doesn't need to be the kain gadol. Or could it be any kain? That's great. So we say in future generations the kain needs to be wearing his clothing. That tells me that he needs to be wearing the kayan's special clothing. So If it's any kayan, then I can understand why maybe he would be wearing other clothing, and we have to tell him he has to wear the kayan hedyet clothing. Elamanda melodais b'kayan gadol. But if you tell me that it needs to be the kayan gadol, so hashta kayan gadol bin and b'kihuna mibai. If it needs to be the kayan gadol, you have to tell me that he needs to be wearing his clothing. You're so strict about this that you're learning from Yom Kippur that it needs to be the kayan gadol, and you have to tell me that the kayan gadol has to be dressed like the kayan gadol. Of course, he has to be. You need the kayan gadol. It's not just a plain kayan. Gemara says in the Torah writes things even though you could have figured it out on your own, even though we have a kal v'chaymer, but nevertheless the Torah spells it out. Now a pure man will gather the ashes of the para and he'll place it. Ish, when it says ish, lahachsher sazar, that's telling me that it doesn't need to be a kayan that collects the ashes. Tahar, it says pure. This is very surprising. Lahachsher as isha, to allow a woman. Now I can't read those two words together. Ish tahar, a pure man. It really doesn't fit. And the most surprising thing is that a minute ago, we had Ishtahar. We had Ishtar somewhere else, but we said it that meant. Where did we have Ishtar? And it meant that it needs to be I'm not sure. There was another Ishtar that told us that it can't be. Well, we said Elazar told us that it can't be a woman. Over here we're saying Ish means that it could be a non-kayan, talking about the gathering of the ashes from the burnt para. And Tahar tells me that it could also be a woman. V'hiniach, and you place it. But however, it can't be a child, deaf mute, or an imbecile that they're not able to place it. They won't know to put it down. I don't know. Someone told me once that there was certain the triple X. What is it called? The Down syndrome. The Down syndrome. The difficulty releasing. I don't know. I don't think that's what it's referring to. It's not referring to the lahaniach to release. But here it's referring to that you need to be able to know to put it down, where to put it down, or whatever, to place it, to save it. This is talking about that it gets put as a remembrance. Right? Put as a remembrance. Okay, Tanan Hassan. We learned in the Mishnah in Para as well, in Mishnah and Para. Hakol ksherim lekadish. Everyone is allowed to put the water of the para aduma, to mix the water with the ashes, put the water on top of the ashes. Chutz, that's what we learned, right? We had a, yeah, but then we had it, yeah. Nothing Allah, my but and you must put them into a vessel of spring water and mix them with the spring water in that vessel. Well, from the Prophet it says V'nasan Allah that he puts on it. Okay. So everyone is acceptable to mix the water with the ashes. Except for this three, a deaf mute, a shaita, an imbecile, and a child. Now, when I say hakol ksherim, the Tanakama, everyone is allowed. That means not just the men, but even the women. That's usually hakol, means anyone. So here we're saying Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says a child is yes allowed. He's arguing on the Tanakama, and he also argues on the Tanakama. Says that a woman is not kosher to mix the water with ashes. Androgynous. Androgynous is a hermaphrodite. Is two signs of a man and of a woman. Yeah. That's the Greek word for that. Because Hermes and Aphrodite was like a male and female. So hermaphrodite. So, my time of the Rabbanan. What's the reason for the Rabbanan that say that a woman is acceptable, but Cher Sheita V'Katan is not? Because it says in the pasuk, they'll take for the impure person from the ashes of the burnt chatas, which means paraduma. Hanach the pasilach ba'asifa, whoever was pasul with the gathering of the ashes, pasilach b'kiddush is also pasul with the mixing of the water. Now remember when we said the gathering of the ashes, we said that it could be anyone, including a woman. So therefore, a woman is acceptable, and a child was not acceptable. That's what we said before. Before we said ish tahar told me ish could be a non-kayan, and tahar meant that it could even be a woman. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda do? There's a comparison between the gathering of the ashes and the mixing of the water with the ashes. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Imkein lemakra v'lakach, my v'lakhu." What is v'lakhu? And they shall take. The afilu katan, the pasal achasam hachakasha. V'lakhu is including. There's a plural, and they will take. It's coming to say that you had one person over there that was not allowed by the gathering of the ashes, a child. I was saying a child is allowed to do the mixing of the water. But isha minale, how do you know that a woman cannot? It says v'nasan v'loy v'nasna. V'lakhu latameh mi'afar sreifas achatus v'nasan alav. And he will place. It doesn't say v'nasnu alav. So now it's a exclusion. So it's excluding the woman. Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan do? It seems like there's an exclusion there. Ikas rachmana v'lakach v'nasan. They say like this. If it would have said v'lakach v'nasan, just singular for both, take and place, havamina deshakal chad v'yav chad, it would have thought that it needs to be only an individual. So ikas rachmana v'lakchu, that two people are allowed to do this. Because rachmana v'lakchu v'nasnu, and if it would say it, the symmetrical, that they shall take and they shall place. So I would have thought that they need to have to. Because that it could be that two people take and one person mixes the ashes. That's also acceptable. This is the next ishtar. Remember what ishtar meant before? Non-kayan, and it could be a woman. That was by the gathering of the ashes. That was the Ostap Ishtar. Now we're holding Ostap 18. No. What pasuk is this? V'lakach ezei v'tavel b'mayim ishtar. Oh, yeah, it's pasuk Yitzhak. V'lakach ezei v'tavel b'mayim ishtar. So what does the ishtar mean? The Rabbanan say ish v'lei isha. Oh, that's what I was expecting. It's the first one that was surprising. This one I can handle. It says, who's going to do the sprinkling? Before it was the gathering of the ashes. Who's going to do the sprinkling? It has to be a man, not a woman. Tahar, pure, lahachsher sakatan, it could be a child. Not a woman, but it could be a child that's going to do the sprinkling. A boy child, right? Yeah. The Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Ish, he says a man, like katan, but it can't be a child. Tahar, pure, lahachsher seisha. So they each the opposite. that a woman is allowed to do the sprinkling. A woman wasn't, according to him, wasn't allowed to do the gathering of the ashes. I'm sorry, not the gathering, the mixing of the water with the ashes, but the sprinkling a woman is allowed to do. Masvi, the Gemara has a question. Everyone is allowed to sprinkle, except for a tumtum is also a woman, man, woman, that their private parts are covered by a skin, so they can't tell if they're male or female. And androgynous, we said, has both signs, male, female. The Isha, everyone's allowed to do the sprinkling, and a woman. The katan, it's either shein by das, the katan, or sheyesh by das, I'm not sure. And the child, katan shein by das, isha misiyate. A woman is allowed to help the child that's going to do the sprinkling. Umaza, and they can do the sprinkling. Now, the problem, so what? So what's the problem with this? We said that a woman is allowed to do the sprinkling. Well, who holds that? Who holds that a woman is allowed to do the sprinkling? So, the problem is for like Polig, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue. The problem is that Rabbi Yehuda would have said that a child is puzzle here. Is that our issue? No. What are we dealing with? When it comes to mixing the water, Rabbi Yehuda says that a child is acceptable. A child is acceptable. Here we're saying that a child is not acceptable unless the woman helps. So Rabbi Yehuda should argue in this Brisa Mishnah. So Amar Abaya says, "Kiven damar mar mashma meitzi miyad mashma memela polik." It's not necessary because we already said that each pasuk comes to say something different than the last pasuk. So every implication that we have is opposite from the one before, so we can understand that there would be a machlekes. V'hiza tar ala tamei, the tar will sprinkle on the tamei. Tar machlal shu tamei. When it says that he's tahar, that meant that he was tamei before, and now he's tahar. Limit al tvol yom shekasher b'tara. That means that someone that was tamei and went to the mikvah but didn't wait for nightfall is also acceptable to sprinkle on the other person. Amar Rabasi. Rabasi says, Ki heavy ba Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish b'para. When Rabbi Yechon Rish Lakish deliberated about these halachas, the only thing they were able to come up with is what a fox is able to get from a plowed field. I guess it means like not a lot of stuff. Ella Amri, what they said was mashma meitzmiad mashma memela. But the way you read the psukim, you can't read one after the other always, because sometimes the implication of the following pasuk takes away from the first pasuk, and sometimes it reads straight. Tani Tana kamed Rabbi Yechanan, the Tana taught in front of Rabbi Yechanan. Kol hashchitas ksheres b'zar chutz mishel para. Said every shchita is kasher b'zar, every korban you're allowed doesn't have to be a kohen, except for the para aduma. Who held that? Rav, right? Amalei Rabbi Yechanan, puktani lebra, get out, teach that outside. Don't say that over here. We never find that a shchita is possible if it's a zar. Rabbi Yechanan leibi by latana leitzayis. Rabbi Yechanan not only doesn't listen to the Tana, elafil l'Rabbi leitzayis, even his own teacher he argued with. Dam Rabbi Yechanan mishum Reb ben Yitzadek shchitas para bizar psula. He says in the name of Reb ben Yitzadek that it's possible, the paraduma is possible if it's a zar, but I say that it's kosher. Limiting shchita psula bizar. Okay, let's finish till the Mishnah. He comes a second time to the para to say the second vidoy. Meisno bevidi rishon de la yamar b'nei Yaranam kadeshecha. Meisno bevidi sheni damar b'nei Yaranam kadeshecha. The second time he does the confession, he adds in the words, and he's atoning for also the other kayanim. The first one he just said aniu basi. Second one he says u'b'nei Yaranam kadeshecha. So Tana de Rabbi Shmuel was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel kachi midas adin nesenes. This is what the logic tells us. Mutab yavizakai v'yechaper alachayev. Someone innocent should come and give an atonement for those that are guilty. Someone that's guilty shouldn't come and atone for the guilty. In other words, first he has to say a vidi for himself and his family. Then he's atoned. Now, you're atoned, you're innocent. Okay, now you can come and we'll listen to you what you have to say about others. But if you're also guilty, so then maybe they're not going to listen to you. So, okay, let's leave it over here.
Thank you.
Good day.